So what does the EGR system do on a diesel engine? Let's discuss it. First, all diesel engines in North America are inline sixes that are in semi-trucks. That means all the pistons are in a straight line. In that configuration, one side is the intake and one side is the exhaust. When the engine is running, the exhaust gases are pushed out. They drive a turbo. This turbo spins, brings in fresh air, cools off that fresh air, and takes it into the intake. Where the EGR comes in play, the EGR valves are tied into the exhaust system. When they are open, some of those exhaust gases get diverted into a separate cooler and then injected back into the intake as they recirculate. That's why it's called exhaust gas recirculation. It's recirculating the exhaust gases back into the intake. Now, is this done for performance? No, it's done for compliance. So I want to discuss more about why these systems are important to keep in play and how to keep them maintained. So let's discuss that next. So how does the EGR work on a DD15? Let's talk about it. The DD15 has a 3-piece exhaust manifold. This is a zoomed in section of just the center piece. Now the EGR valve is made into the centerpiece of the exhaust manifold. When that valve opens, some of the exhaust gases come through this way through a hot pipe and into the EGR cooler. The EGR cooler has coolant tubes all the way through and it's surrounded by coolant from the engine. So when it comes in, it's hot. When it comes out, it's at a lower temperature, still hot, but a lot lower than what it's come in. When you're inspecting these EGR coolers, you always want to inspect the inlet side because that's the side that gets the most abuse. It's getting all the exhaust gases coming in when that opens up. Now, one thing I want to mention with newer engines, they're getting rid of wastegates and actuated turbos. The DD15, on their most modern engine, there is no actuator on the turbo or wastegate. What they're using is the EGR valve to control boost. And that's very important because when you have people that are eliminating these systems and eliminating the EGR valve, you're creating excessive boost that can cause a lot of damage to the engine. Another thing that's important is if you're not keeping up with maintenance, no valve adjustments, not changing your fuel filters on time or changing your oil, you're going to create more soot in the exhaust. When the exhaust gases start creating more soot, it's going to have a higher chance of building up these EGR coolers. So that's why it's very important to keep up with maintenance as well. So what issues can you find on modern EGR systems? We're going to take a look at the exhaust side of a DD15 and how the setup is. Here is the EGR cooler here, the exhaust manifold, the turbo, and a hot pipe. As I mentioned before, the EGR valve is inside the centerpiece of the exhaust manifold. When that's open, exhaust gases are being passed through the EGR cooler. Now, the cooler is going to cool this tons. I mean, we're talking about up to 1200 degrees of temperature going in and coming out around 350. So that's massive amount of temperature. And what that does to the cooling system, it can put a big strain. In max output settings, it's actually raising the coolant temperature by 10 degrees. So when that amount of heat transfer puts a big strain on cooling systems, that's why it's important to keep up with your coolant. If you see rusted coolant, when it gets that rusted look, that means a lot of the inhibitors have been cooked out of it. So another thing that will cause issues with these EGR coolers is if you're low duty cycle, low idling, that's pushing unburnt fuel into your EGR cooler as well. That's why there are idling limits on your DD15s and most modern engines. I mentioned earlier, modern engines, I would say just for the DD15 for now, are not using actuators on their turbo. It's just a straight turbo like they use on older engines, which is a design that I really like. But in turn, they don't have a wastegate, and what they're doing is using the EGR valve as a wastegate. So that's why it's really important when they're doing these eliminations that you can cause some big problems on these engines. So now we're going to look at the code side or the intake side of a DD15. When we mentioned the EGR cooler, this is a tube that's connected from the EGR cooler going into the intake, and this is where the completion of the exhaust recirculation system. There's a sensor here. It's mostly called a delta P sensor, which is just a differential pressure sensor. What that's going to do is going to be reading pressure in and pressure out. Sometimes these will get clogged up, and that's also what controls your EGR valve as well, along with other sensors as your intake temperature sensor. The older models did try to control the intake with a throttle valve, but there was a lot of problems with that. Some engines are still using that throttle valve, but I think over time they're going to end up moving all over to the EGR valve controlling. Now, everyone is like, EGR systems are a blow, modern engines are the worst. Honestly, modern engines are more efficient than older engines. I know that older engines are going to have a quicker pickup and more response, but they're burning a lot of raw fuel and they're using older technologies. Like, for example, the DD15 was the first to introduce the high pressure system on modern engines, and a lot of systems are doing that as well. But it's not just the high pressure. The high pressure system is supplying constant pressure on a common fuel rail to these injectors, and they're injecting fuel in stages to get a better burn. So when they're doing that, it needs the correct amount of excessive temperature coming in, because they are using EGR flow, exhaust temperatures are higher. So when all that comes into factor, is being read by different sensors across. You're talking intake sensor, all these different sensors, and that's why it's also important to check your sensors, because sensors over time will get clogged up with soot and cause you to have problems as well and shorten the life of your EGR system. But a lot of people, I know they're against these EGR systems and they don't like how the exhaust is being recirculated back in. But you got to understand, these engines were designed to run off of those exhaust gases coming back in. So when they're removed or they're tampered with, they're not going to run as efficient as they're made. They may run for a while depending on how the engine is being operated, but modern engines are a lot more efficient. They are actually getting a lot more fuel mileage than older model engines. So they may seem like they have a little bit more maintenance, but once you understand the system, then you get a better idea of how to maintain it. This is what I wanted to discuss about EGR systems on modern engines. I hope this video has helped you. If it did, be sure to hit that like and subscribe. And if you're in the DFW area and looking for service, you can call us at 972-225-3017 or visit us at 4140 Langdon Road, Dallas, Texas 75241. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.